Everyone thinks power means never showing weakness. They're wrong. History's greatest strategists knew something most people never learn. Sometimes revealing your vulnerabilities is the ultimate power move. While everyone else builds walls, true masters know exactly when to lower their shields. Machiavelli, infamous for his ruthless tactics, had a secret weapon most overlook. He understood that calculated vulnerability can disarm enemies, build unshakable trust, and position you to win without firing a shot. Think about it. When someone shares something personal with you, don't you instantly feel closer to them? That's not an accident. That's power working silently beneath the surface. In a world obsessed with projecting strength, the strategic reveal of weakness creates an asymmetry your competitors can't match. Tech CEOs accidentally sharing failures, negotiators revealing their bottom line, politicians showing unscripted emotion. These aren't mistakes. They're masterful plays straight from Machiavelli's forgotten playbook. By the end of this video, you'll understand precisely when vulnerability transforms from weakness into strength, how to use controlled transparency to dissolve skepticism, and the exact framework for turning apparent weakness into your greatest advantage. This isn't about being authentic for authenticity's sake. This is about the strategic deployment of vulnerability as the ultimate power tool. Before I reveal these Machiavellian principles, understand this. Once you see how power truly operates, you cannot unsee it. This knowledge will fundamentally shift how you read people, situations, and the games being played around you every day. If you're not ready for that level of awareness, stop watching now. For everyone else, pay attention to every word. Let's dive in. Number 1. The vulnerability paradox. Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect, never making mistakes, always saying the right things? Did you trust them completely? Probably not. There's something unsettling about perfection that keeps us on edge. This odd reaction reveals something crucial about human psychology. We're wired to distrust what seems too flawless. It triggers our suspicion, making us wonder what's being hidden beneath that polished surface. Now flip that around. Think about the last time someone admitted a weakness to you. Not a devastating flaw, but an honest acknowledgement of imperfection. Didn't you feel yourself warming up to them? That immediate connection wasn't coincidental. What's happening in these moments is what I call the trust accelerant effect, and it's the first key principle in our strategic vulnerability arsenal. This is point number 1 out of 5, the vulnerability paradox. Brain imaging studies have revealed something fascinating here. When someone selectively reveals weaknesses in areas unrelated to their core competencies, it triggers oxytocin production in listeners. That's the exact same bonding chemical released when mothers hold their babies or when we embrace loved ones. This chemical reaction makes people up to 3 times more likely to trust your strengths without questioning them. The science is clear. Strategic vulnerability doesn't weaken your position. It chemically rewires others to trust you faster and deeper. The key is selectivity. This isn't about laying all your weaknesses bare. It's about strategically revealing vulnerabilities that humanize you without undermining your essential credentials. For example, if you're pitching investors, admitting you're nervous about the presentation actually increases their confidence in your business acumen. Why? Because authenticity in one area creates a halo effect of trustworthiness around everything else you say. Think of vulnerability as strategic disclosure, not random confession. When a negotiator admits they're anxious about closing a deal but extremely confident in their product's value, they're not just being transparent. They are deploying a psychological weapon that disarms skepticism, the most powerful application. Reveal vulnerabilities in areas tangential to your core strengths. A doctor admitting uncertainty about administrative procedures while showing complete confidence in medical knowledge doesn't appear weak. They appear honest and therefore more trustworthy on medical matters. Start implementing this today. Before your next important interaction, identify one strategic vulnerability that humanizes you without compromising your position. Share it early, directly, and without apology. Then watch as the trust accelerant effect transforms the dynamic, creating deeper connection and greater influence than perfect composure ever could. Remember, this isn't manipulation, it's understanding human connection on a neurochemical level and using that knowledge strategically. The paradox is clear. Selective vulnerability doesn't diminish your power, it multiplies it. Number 2. The preemptive confession strategy. Imagine you're delivering a crucial presentation when suddenly you notice a mistake in your data. Your heart races. Should you hope no one notices? Or should you point it out yourself? Most people instinctively choose silence, but that's exactly the wrong move. What if I told you that acknowledging your own mistakes before others can point them out doesn't just save face, it actually increases your influence? This counterintuitive approach flips conventional wisdom on its head, but the evidence supporting it is overwhelming. Welcome to our second strategic vulnerability principle, the preemptive confession strategy. This technique involves diffusing potential criticism by owning your imperfections before your opponents can use them against you. It's a powerful psychological concept that psychologists call inoculation immunity, just as vaccines work by introducing weakened pathogens to build resistance. Acknowledging your flaws first builds resistance against others' attempts to use them against you. When you preemptively confess weaknesses, 3 powerful things happen. First, you strip others of ammunition. They can't attack what you've already acknowledged. It's like taking a weapon from their hands before they even know they need it. Second, you position yourself as the more honest, self-aware party. By demonstrating self-awareness, you signal confidence and integrity that paradoxically strengthens your position. Third, and most remarkably, you reduce the effectiveness of opposing arguments by up to 67%. Studies have documented that criticisms lose their persuasive power dramatically when they've been preemptively addressed. Consider how masterfully Warren Buffett uses this technique in his annual shareholder letters. Before discussing successes, he candidly addresses mistakes and miscalculations. This preemptive confession doesn't diminish his authority. It reinforces it, cementing his reputation as trustworthy even when delivering difficult news. The key to implementation lies in timing and framing. Address potential weaknesses early in your communications, but immediately pivot to your plan for addressing them. This creates a narrative where you're not defined by flaws, but by your proactive approach to improvement. For example, in negotiations, acknowledging a limitation in your proposal before the other party discovers, it positions you as honest and shifts the conversation from adversarial detection to collaborative problem solving. The preemptive confession strategy doesn't mean dwelling on weaknesses. It means acknowledging them briefly, matter-of-factly, and with confidence before quickly redirecting to strengths. It's about controlling the narrative. Start practicing this approach in lower-stakes situations. Before your next team meeting, identify one potential criticism of your work and address it proactively. Notice how this disarms critics and positions you as more credible and self-aware. Remember, this strategy isn't about self-deprecation or false humility. It's about strategic disclosure that transforms potential vulnerabilities from liabilities into assets. By owning your imperfections before others can weaponize them, you create psychological inoculation that strengthens your position rather than weakening it. In a world where everyone tries to hide their weaknesses, the strategic revelation of yours becomes a surprising source of power. Master the preemptive confession strategy and watch as your influence grows, not despite your acknowledged imperfections, but because of them. If you're still here, you already think differently. That alone sets you apart. Now, sharpen your edge, hit subscribe, This is how you stay 10 steps ahead in a world that rewards the silent strategist. Number 3. The vulnerability contrast principle. Have you ever watched a magic show where the performer deliberately fumbles at the start? They drop cards or struggle with a simple trick, making you wonder if you're watching an amateur. Then suddenly they execute something so spectacular it leaves you breathless. That initial weakness wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated setup to make what followed seem even more impressive. This deliberate contrast between vulnerability and strength isn't just for magicians. It's a psychological principle that the most influential people in the world use every day, often without their audiences ever realizing it. Let me introduce you to the third powerful tool in our strategic vulnerability arsenal, the vulnerability contrast principle. This is point number 3 out of 5, and it might be the most immediately transformative technique you'll learn today. The principle works like this. Strategic power players create deliberate vulnerability moments, followed by displays of extraordinary competence. This dramatic contrast creates what I call competence magnification, where your strengths appear exponentially more impressive against the backdrop of admitted weakness. This psychological principle explains why leaders who occasionally admit mistakes are rated 42% more competent than those who never do. The contrast between vulnerability and strength doesn't diminish your perceived competence, it dramatically amplifies it. Think about it. When someone never admits weaknesses, we don't perceive them as flawless. Instead, we assume they're hiding their flaws, which makes us question everything they say. But when someone confidently acknowledges a limitation before demonstrating exceptional skill, that contrast creates a powerful impression of authentic mastery. Apple's Steve Jobs masterfully employed this technique. In product launches, he would often acknowledge limitations of previous models before unveiling new features, creating a dramatic contrast that made innovations seem even more revolutionary. The vulnerability moment set the stage for the strength display that followed. To implement this principle effectively, timing is everything. Create the vulnerability moment early in your interaction, making it brief but authentic. Then create a clear transition to your demonstration of competence, allowing the contrast to naturally magnify your strengths. For example, in a job interview, you might briefly acknowledge your learning curve with a specific software before immediately demonstrating your exceptional proficiency with related systems and your track record of quickly mastering new tools. The contrast makes your adaptability and expertise seem even more impressive than if you'd simply listed qualifications. In leadership, this might look like acknowledging uncertainty about a specific market trend before presenting a comprehensive analysis that demonstrates deep insight into broader industry patterns. The initial vulnerability makes your subsequent expertise seem not just competent, but remarkable. The key is authenticity in both moments. The vulnerability must be genuine, and the competence must be substantive. When both elements are authentic, the contrast between them creates a compelling narrative of honest mastery that mere perfection can never achieve. Start practicing this principle today. Before your next opportunity to demonstrate expertise, identify a genuine limitation you can briefly acknowledge. Then create a clear transition to your area of exceptional strength. Watch as this contrast transforms how others perceive your capabilities. Remember, this isn't about manipulating perceptions. It's about strategically sequencing honest vulnerability and genuine strength for maximum impact. Master the vulnerability contrast principle, and you'll transform how others perceive your competence, not by hiding weaknesses, but by strategically revealing them at precisely the right moment. Number 4, the calculated transparency timeline. Have you ever shared something personal with someone too soon and instantly regretted it? or waited too long to reveal important information, damaging trust when it finally came to light. Timing vulnerability incorrectly can be disastrous, turning what could be a strategic advantage into a costly mistake. Most people approach vulnerability with gut feeling alone, revealing too much too soon or holding back until it's too late. But what if there was a precise framework for knowing exactly what to reveal and when? A method that turns vulnerability from a risky exposure into a calculated asset with predictable returns. This brings us to our fourth strategic principle, the calculated transparency timeline. This is point number 4 out of 5 in our strategic vulnerability framework, and it addresses the critical question of timing that most people get wrong. The core insight here is that vulnerability deployed at random is dangerous. Strategic vulnerability follows a precise timeline based on relationship stage and context. This precision approach transforms vulnerability from an emotional risk into a calculated asset with predictable returns on relationship capital. The calculated transparency timeline works across 4 distinct phases. In Phase 1, the connection phase, reveal universal vulnerabilities that humanize you without exposing specific weaknesses. This might include admitting general challenges like public speaking makes me nervous, rather than specific insecurities. These universal disclosures build initial rapport without unnecessary exposure. Phase 2, the credibility phase, introduces selective professional vulnerabilities that demonstrate self-awareness. This might include acknowledging specific knowledge gaps while highlighting your learning approach. These calculated disclosures build trust through honesty while maintaining authority. Moving to Phase 3, the collaboration phase, share contextual vulnerabilities directly relevant to your current shared goals. This might mean admitting uncertainty about specific project elements while demonstrating confidence in the overall direction. These strategic disclosures transform potential obstacles into opportunities for partnership. Finally, in Phase 4, the commitment phase, reveal deeper vulnerabilities that cement long-term relationships. These more substantial disclosures are reserved for established relationships where trust foundations are already solid. The power of this timeline approach is that it matches vulnerability depth precisely to relationship development, maximizing impact while minimizing risk. Each disclosure builds on previous ones, creating an escalating ladder of trust rather than a risky cliff jump. The timing precision matters enormously. Studies show that premature vulnerability creates discomfort and reduces influence, while delayed vulnerability appears calculated and reduces authenticity. But vulnerability timed according to this framework increases both trust and influence by up to 64%. For example, in sales relationships, Phase 1 vulnerabilities might be shared in initial meetings, Phase 2 during proposal discussions, Phase 3 during implementation planning, and Phase 4 only during long-term account management. This calculated progression builds increasingly deeper trust at each appropriate stage. Start implementing this framework today by mapping your key relationships to these 4 phases. Identify which phase each relationship is in, then calibrate your vulnerability accordingly. You'll immediately notice interactions becoming more productive as trust develops in a structured, strategic progression. Remember, strategic vulnerability isn't about random transparency. It's about calculated disclosure, calibrated precisely to relationship stage and context. Master the calculated transparency timeline, and you'll transform vulnerability from a risky exposure into a powerful asset with predictable returns on relationship capital. Number 5, the vulnerability reciprocity loop. Have you ever noticed how, when someone shares something personal with you, you feel an almost irresistible urge to share something equally revealing in return? This isn't just politeness. It's a hardwired human response so powerful that it operates across cultures, contexts, and even in high-stakes situations where revealing information could be disadvantageous. This powerful psychological mechanism forms the basis of our fifth and final strategic vulnerability principle, the vulnerability reciprocity loop. This is point number 5 out of 5, and it might be the most tactically advantageous technique in our entire strategic vulnerability arsenal. When you strategically reveal weaknesses, you activate what anthropologists call the disclosure reciprocity effect, a hardwired human impulse to match openness with openness. This creates an intelligence advantage where others voluntarily reveal more than you do, giving you the information edge while they believe the exchange was equal. Studies show this technique yields 3.4 times more actionable intelligence in negotiations than direct questioning. Think about that. By strategically revealing one piece of information, you receive more than 3 pieces in return, creating a massive information asymmetry in your favor. The power of this principle lies in its subtle implementation. Unlike direct questions which trigger defensive responses, strategic vulnerability creates a psychological obligation to reciprocate that bypasses normal information barriers. FBI negotiators and intelligence professionals have long used variations of this technique. They know that carefully calibrated self-disclosure creates more reliable intelligence than interrogation ever could. The key is initiating the vulnerability loop with disclosures that seem valuable to the other party, while actually revealing very little of strategic importance. For example, in negotiations revealing apparent limitations in your timeline, "We're hoping to close by year-end, though that's creating some challenges for our team," often triggers the other party to reveal far more consequential information about their own constraints. The vulnerability appears equal, but the intelligence value is dramatically asymmetric. To implement this principle effectively, begin with what I call high perceived value, low actual cost disclosures. These are revelations that seem significant to the other party, but don't materially disadvantage your position. These initial disclosures activate the reciprocity loop, leading others to share increasingly valuable information. The most powerful application comes from sequencing multiple vulnerability loops. Each exchange builds psychological momentum, with each reciprocal disclosure becoming progressively more valuable. By the 3rd or 4th exchange, others are often revealing crucial information that direct questioning would never uncover. Start practicing today in lower-stakes conversations. Share something personal but strategically inconsequential. Then notice how others automatically reciprocate, often with more substantive revelations. As you become comfortable with the technique, apply it in increasingly important contexts. Remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding and leveraging natural human psychological patterns. The vulnerability reciprocity loop creates mutual disclosure that builds genuine connection while simultaneously providing you with a critical information advantage. Master this principle, and you'll transform vulnerability from a liability into your most powerful tool for gaining information advantage in any interaction, all while building deeper trust and connection than direct questioning could ever achieve. You've now mastered the 5 principles of strategic vulnerability, weapons that transform what most see as weakness into your most powerful strategic advantage. Remember, this isn't about random transparency or emotional exposure. It's about the calculated deployment of vulnerability as a precision instrument of influence and connection. By understanding the vulnerability paradox, you create trust acceleration that chemistry alone can't match. Through the preemptive confession strategy, you disarm critics before they can attack. With the vulnerability contrast principle, you magnify your strengths through strategic weakness. Using the calculated transparency timeline, you reveal exactly the right information at precisely the right moment. And with the vulnerability reciprocity loop, you gain critical information advantages while building genuine connection. Machiavelli understood what most never grasp, that strategic vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the ultimate expression of power. Begin implementing these principles today and watch as the strategic deployment of vulnerability transforms your influence, your relationships, and ultimately, your results. The next video the algorithm chose for you isn't random. It's your next tactical upgrade. Click it now and continue your silent ascent. Those who hesitate lose influence.